Revenge with Karen.
The mud at the Holloway Ridge development didn't smell like honest dirt. It smelled like sulfur, diesel runoff, and the specific, metallic stink of corners being cut so hard they bled. I adjusted the strap of my hard hat, scuffed to hell, purposefully indistinguishable from the grunt gear aimed at day laborers, and stepped out of my beat-up F-150. The air in western Pennsylvania, this time of year, usually bites, but today it just felt heavy, like a wet wool blanket draped over a crime scene. I wasn't supposed to be here. Well, Tanya, the state inspector, wasn't supposed to be here. Not yet. Officially, I was a ghost in the system, a shadow on the payroll of subcontractor who owed me a favor from back when I saved his ass from a federal OSHA audit. To the naked eye, I was just another middle-aged woman in a neon yellow vest that was 2 sizes too big, carrying a clipboard that looked like it had been used to smack rats in a basement. I walked toward the perimeter fence, my steel-toed boots sinking into the muck. The site was a chaotic symphony of OSHA violations. I saw a guy on a scissor lift without a harness, treating gravity like a suggestion. I saw rebar uncapped, sticking out of the ground like rusty spears, waiting to impale the next clumsy apprentice. It made my teeth itch. I've been inspecting structures across the Rust Belt for 20 years. I know what a building sounds like when it's going up right. It hums. This place, it rattled, it wheezed. Hey, real quick, if you're into stories about taking down arrogant suits and watching corrupt empires crumble into dust, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It keeps the coffee brewing and the truth flowing. Okay, back to the mud. I navigated through the labyrinth of pallets, stacked too high and extension cords, snaking through puddles deep enough to drown a cat. My eyes were scanning, recording, dissecting. The Holloway project was billed as luxury living for the modern elite. The brochures showed glass walls and rooftop gardens. What I saw was concrete that looked too porous and support columns that seemed to be leaning away from responsibility. Hey, you, one staring at the rebar like it's going to recite Shakespeare. The voice cracked through the air like a whip. I didn't flinch. I turned slowly, channeling every ounce of patience I didn't have. Striding toward me was Craig. You know a Craig. He's the guy who wears a pristine white hard hat that's never seen a speck of dust, with a polo shirt tucked into khakis that cost more than my first car. He looked like he was crafted in a lab funded by daddy's money and protein powder. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice flat, stripping it of the authoritative cadence I usually used to shut down job sites. Yeah, that's how you talk to the site manager. Craig stopped 3 feet from me, invading my personal space with the confidence of a man who has never been punched in the throat. He smelled like aggressive cologne and mints. I don't pay you to admire the geometry, lady. I pay you to move material. Why aren't you hauling scrap from the B block? I looked at him, really looked at him. He had that glint in his eye, the one that says he views people as disposable assets, interchangeable parts in his grand machine. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? The last time we occupied the same zip code, I was in a blazer, sitting across a mahogany table, telling his bosses that their soil compaction data was a fairy tale. That report got buried. I got fired from that contract. They thought I was gone. Just getting my bearings, boss, I mumbled, deliberately looking at my boots. Agency sent me over, said to report to the foreman. I am the foreman. I am the manager. I am the god of this little muddy universe, Craig sneered, adjusting his sunglasses even though it was overcast. And if you don't get your ass moving toward the debris pile in the next 30 seconds, I'm going to dock your pay before you even clock in. We're 2 weeks behind schedule because of incompetent grunts like you. Move. He pointed a manicured finger toward a pile of twisted metal and shattered drywall near the eastern foundation, the exact spot I needed to see. The irony was so rich I could taste it. He was ordering me to inspect the very evidence that would eventually hang him. On it, I said, turning away before my face betrayed the pure, unadulterated rage boiling in my gut. I walked toward the foundation, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs. It wasn't fear. It was the adrenaline of the hunt. I remembered the feeling of helplessness 2 years ago when the paperwork vanished, when the bribes were paid, when I was told to stop being hysterical about structural integrity. They treated safety like a nuisance and me like a nagging housewife. Not this time. I reached the debris pile and crouched down, pretending to sort through the scrap. From this angle, I had a clear line of sight to the exposed foundation wall of the main tower. I pulled a small, high-resolution camera from my pocket, hidden behind the bulk of the clipboard. The concrete was weeping. Not literally, but technically, efflorescence, white salty streaks running down the gray face. It meant water was moving through the slab. It meant the waterproofing was either botched or non-existent. And in a freeze-thaw cycle state like Pennsylvania, it wasn't just a defect. It was a ticking time bomb. Enjoying the view, Craig's voice drifted over, dripping with sarcasm. He was watching me from the trailer steps, laughing into his phone. Just looking for the good stuff, I whispered to myself, snapping a photo of a hairline fracture that zigzagged like a lightning bolt near the footer. Keep laughing, pretty boy. I'm just here to measure the coffin. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was an excavation of the truth. I brought my own shovel. The deeper I waded into the Holloway site, the more it felt like I was walking through a graveyard that hadn't been filled yet. The damp cold of the Pennsylvania morning had settled into my bones, a familiar ache that reminded me of 20 years of crawling through crawl spaces and arguing with men who thought code compliance was a suggestion from the liberals in Harrisburg. I spent the next hour moving scrap metal with a rhythmic, hypnotic motion. Lift, carry, toss. Lift, carry, toss. It was a perfect cover. Nobody looks at the person hauling trash. You become invisible, a piece of the machinery less interesting than a forklift. But my eyes were sharp, darting left and right, cataloging the sins of this construction site. That's when I saw the truck. It was a beat-up Ford F-350 with a faded logo on the door, Miller & Sons Earthworks. My stomach dropped like an elevator with a cut cable. Miller, same outfit that faked the soil density tests on the collapsed strip mall project in Erie 5 years ago. They were cheap, they were fast, and they had a reputation for burying their mistakes, literally. If Miller was here, it meant the ground we were standing on was likely unstable fill, packed down with nothing but prayers and bribes. I drifted closer, dragging a piece of corrugated metal as a prop. A guy in a Miller vest was arguing with a crane operator. I knew him. Restrap Gary? We called him that because he always looked oily, and he could slip out of any regulation with a handshake and a grin. Don't worry about the compaction report, Gary was saying, spitting tobacco juice onto the gravel. Craig said to just pour the slab. We'll backdate the density test later. Who's gonna check? The city inspector is blind as a bat. I clenched the clipboard so hard the plastic cracked. They weren't just cutting corners. We're erasing the map. Backdating density tests meant they were building a 10-story luxury condo on a foundation of jello. I needed to get closer to the welding crew. The structural steel is the skeleton of the beast. If the bones are bad, the body falls. I hauled my pile of scrap toward the welding station, where sparks were cascading down like angry fireworks. An older guy was there, his welding mask flipped up, had a face like crumpled leather and eyes that had seen too many friends get hurt on the job. He was staring at a joint on the main column line, shaking his head. Heavy load for a Tuesday, I said, dropping my scrap nearby. It was the universal opener of the blue-collar worker, a noncommittal complaint about the work. The welder looked at me, assessing. He saw the vest, the dirt on my face, the weary posture. He didn't see the inspector. He saw a fellow grunt. The weight that worries me, he muttered, pulling a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. It's what's holding it up. I leaned in, lowering my voice. Looks like standard I-beams to me. What's the rub? He lit a cigarette, cupping the flame against the wind. These beams, they're Chinese imports, recycled scrap steel. Stamped grade 50, but they grind like grade 36. Soft. You heat 'em up too much, they warp like a plastic spoon in a microwave. I told the super, egg that preppy bastard, and he told me to crank the voltage and shut my mouth. That's illegal, I said, the words slipping out before I could catch them. If the tensile strength isn't rated. The welder laughed, a dry, hacking sound that ended in a cough. Illegal? Honey, look around. You see that soil crew? They're burying tree stumps in the load-bearing zone. You see the electricians? They're running non-plenum wire in the ceiling drops. Legal is just a word for too expensive on this job. He took a long drag, his eyes narrowing at the skeletal frame of the building. I got 2 years till pension. I'm just trying to keep my head down, but I wouldn't buy a condo here. I wouldn't let my dog sleep here. I nodded, pretending to agree, but my mind was racing. Substandard steel, faked soil tests. This wasn't just negligence, it was a conspiracy of cheapness. I pulled out my phone, tending to change the music, and snapped a burst of photos of the beam markings and the sloppy, porous welds that were already showing signs of stress fractures. I compared the beam stamp to a database I had bookmarked. Shanxi Steel Co., batch 404. I remembered a bulletin from the American Institute of Steel Construction about that batch. It had high phosphorus content, brittle in cold weather. We were in Pennsylvania. In November. Hey, you two, is a coffee break or a construction site? Craig's voice cut through the noise again. He was standing on the second-floor gantry, looking down at us like a king from a balcony. Get back to work, he screamed, and you, trash lady, if I see you standing still again, you're walking home. The welder flipped his mask down, retreating into his sparks. I grabbed my debris and moved, head down. Trash lady, I whispered to myself, tasting the grit in my teeth. That's fine, Craig, keep talking, 'cause I'm finding plenty of trash, and most of it is wearing a white hard hat. I had the steel, I had the soil, but I needed the paper. I needed to know who signed off on this death trap, and I knew exactly where to find it. By noon, the sun had tried to break through the clouds and failed, leaving the sky the color of a bruised shin. My back was screaming. It had been a few years since I did actual manual labor. Hauling galvanized pipe across a muddy lot is a young person's game. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the mental torture of watching this disaster unfold in real time. I was near the temporary site office, a double-wide trailer sitting on cinder blocks, trying to get a look at the permit board posted in the window. Legally, they have to display the active permits. Usually, on a job this dirty, hang them behind dirty glass or stack boxes in front of them. I was squinting at a permit that looked like it had been photocopied 3 times when the door banged open. Craig stepped out, followed by a woman in a beige trench coat and heels that cost more than my mortgage payment. Councilwoman Hatcher. I recognized her from the local news. She was the one pushing the Revitalize Our Ridge campaign, promising affordable luxury and tax revenue. Had a smile that didn't reach her eyes, painted on like the safety stripes on the asphalt. Craig, frankly, the investors are nervous, Hatcher was saying, her voice tight. The ribbon cutting is scheduled for the 15th. That's 10 days. The mayor is coming. The press is coming. If this shell isn't closed up, it'll be done, Councilwoman, Craig said, using a voice so oily you could fry an egg on it. We're fast-tracking the final structural sign-offs. My guys are working double shifts. Fast-tracking, she repeated, looking around the site with distaste as her heel sank slightly into the gravel. Does that mean properly? Craig laughed, a dismissive sound. It means paperwork is fluid. Don't worry about the details, Linda. Just worry about the hors d'oeuvres for the gala. We're building the future here. I must have leaned too close, or maybe my disgust was palpable, because Craig's head snapped toward me. He saw me standing there, muddy, holding a clipboard. Eavesdropping, you, he roared. The conversation stopped. Every head on the job site turned. The laborers, the carpenters, the electricians, everyone froze. Craig marched down the wooden steps, his face flushing red. What is your obsession with standing around? Are you deaf or just stupid? He didn't wait for an answer. He grabbed the clipboard from my hand, my prop, my shield, and threw it onto the muddy ground. Pick it up, he commanded. I stared at him. The disrespect was physical. It felt like a slap. My instinct was to reach into my back pocket, pull out my badge, state inspector, license #4922, and shut this entire circus down right now. I could legally freeze this site in 10 minutes, but I couldn't, not yet. If I stopped it now, they'd just pay a fine, fire a few subcontractors, and restart in a month. Craig would get a slap on the wrist. Hatcher would claim ignorance. I needed the kill shot. I needed undeniable proof of criminal negligence that would bury them all. So I swallowed my pride. It tasted like bile and copper. I said, pick it up. Craig sneered, playing to the audience. He wanted to show the councilwoman he was a strong leader. He was showing her he was a bully. Slowly, deliberately, I bent down. My knees cracked. I picked up the muddy clipboard. Sorry, sir, I said, my voice quiet. Won't happen again. Damn right it won't, Craig spat. You're lucky I'm desperate for bodies, or you'd be in the unemployment line. Now get out of my sight. Go clean the portable toilets if you can't handle the heavy lifting. That seems about your speed. The councilwoman watched this entire exchange without blinking. She didn't look horrified. She looked bored. To her, I wasn't a person. I was an expense line item, a glitch in the matrix of her political ascent. Charming management style, she murmured as they turned back to the trailer. Some people only understand the stick, Linda, Craig replied loud enough for me to hear. I walked away, clutching the dirty clipboard to my chest. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort it took not to scream. Clean the toilets, that's what he thought I was worth. I walked past the welder I'd spoken to earlier. He looked at me with pity. Don't let him get to you, he whispered. He's just a suit. He's not a suit. I whispered back, my eyes fixed on the trailer where the deals were being cut. He's a target. I went to the back of the site, near the pour potties, but I didn't clean them. I pulled out my phone. I had heard enough, fast-tracking sign-offs. That meant the fix was in at the permit office. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. Hello? A hesitant male voice answered. Dave, I said, my voice hard as flint. It's Tanya. Don't hang up. I need to know who is handling the Holloway file at the county office. And don't tell me you don't know, because you owe me. There was a silence on the line, then a sigh. Tanya, you shouldn't be poking around there. It's marked priority red. That means hands off. It goes straight to the deputy director. The deputy director, I repeated. The one who just bought a new boat. I didn't say that, Dave stammered. You didn't have to, I said. Meet me tonight. Diner on Route 9. Bring coppers. I hung up. The humiliation burned in my chest, a hot, focused fire. Craig thought he had broken me. He thought he had asserted his dominance. All he had done was ensure his own destruction. He wanted the toilets cleaned? Fine. I was about to flush his entire career. The diner on Route 9 was the kind of place where the menu was sticky. The coffee tasted like battery acid. The waitress looked like she knew exactly how you were going to die. It was perfect. No one from Craig's country club world would ever be caught dead here. I sat in a corner booth, nursing a mug of black coffee, watching the headlights sweep across the rain-slicked parking lot. I had scrubbed the job site mud off my face, but I couldn't scrub the anger out of my pores. It had settled in deep. At 11:00 p.m., Dave walked in. He looked terrible. Pale, nervous, clutching a manila envelope like it was a bomb. Dave was a good kid once, a junior clerk in the permit office who actually cared about codes. But the system grinds the good ones down until they're just cogs trying not to get crushed. He slid into the booth opposite me, refusing to make eye contact. He didn't order anything. You look like hell, Tanya, he said softly. I look like a laborer, I corrected him. Which is what I am these days, apparently. Laborer who cleans toilets. I heard about the Holloway site, Dave whispered, glancing around the empty diner. Everyone knows, it's the Golden Child project. The mayor wants it done before the election. Hatcher is pushing it. The developers are throwing money around like confetti. And the inspections? I asked, leaning in. How are they passing soil compaction when I saw them burying tree stumps? How are they passing the steel framing when the welds look like bubblegum? Dave hesitated, then slid the envelope across the chipped formica table. Open it. I undid the clasp and pulled out a stack of photocopies. My eyes scanned the documents, my inspector's brain translating the bureaucratic gibberish into a narrative of crime. Permit #8892B, foundation approval. Signed by nobody. It was stamped administratively approved per Directive 12. Directive 12? I asked, looking up. When does a directive override a physical inspection? Since the deputy director created it last month, Dave said, his voice trembling. It allows for expedited review based on contractor reputation. Basically, if the developer is on the VIP list, they self-certify. I felt a vein throb in my temple. Self-certify? Craig is self-certifying his own safety checks. It gets worse, Dave said, pointing to the second page. I flipped the sheet. It was an email chain. Internal correspondence between the developer, Holloway Group, and the deputy director's office. Subject, the problem. From Craig M. at Holloway Group Com to DD Office Private Body, we have a potential issue. There's a rumor that the old inspector, Tanya Redacted, is sniffing around. She's flagged as disgruntled in the system, right? If she files anything, I need it to go straight to the shredder. We can't afford delays. Cracks in the east slab are cosmetic. We're patching them tomorrow. The cracks in the east slab, I read aloud, the words tasting like poison. He admits it. He knows the foundation is failing. He calls them cosmetic, Dave said weakly. They aren't cosmetic, Dave. I slammed the table, rattling the silverware. I saw them today. They're structural shear fractures. If that building is fully loaded with people and furniture, and we get a heavy snow load, that slab shears. Whole eastern wing collapses. We're talking about a pancaked building. We're talking about bodies. Dave flinched. I know, that's why I came. I can't sleep, Tanya. I signed these papers because I have a mortgage and 2 kids, but I can't have blood on me. I looked at him. He was a coward, yes. But he was a coward who had given me the weapon I needed. You did good, Dave, I said, tucking the documents into my jacket. This email chain, this is the smoking gun. Proves intent. It proves they know the danger and they're hiding it to meet a deadline. What are you going to do? Dave asked, his eyes wide with fear. If you go public now, they'll spin it. They'll say you're a crazy, fired ex-employee with a grudge. They'll say the documents are faked. He's right, I thought. The disgruntled flag. They had preemptively discredited me. If I went to the press now, it would be a he said, she said, and the guy with the expensive suit usually wins those. Not going to the press yet, I said, standing up and throwing a $10 bill on the table. I need one more thing. I need to catch him in the act of covering it up. He said they're patching the cracks tomorrow. Dave nodded. That's what the email said. Good, I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf watching a sheep wander away from the herd. Because tomorrow, I'm going to be there. And I'm going to make sure that patch becomes his tombstone. I walked out of the diner into the rain. The envelope felt heavy against my ribs. It wasn't just paper anymore, it was a demolition order. And tomorrow, I was going to pull the trigger. The next morning, the Holloway site was buzzing with a frantic, nervous energy. It was 6 a.m., still dark, but the floodlights were blazing, casting long, distorted shadows across the mud. The air smelled of wet cement and desperation. I was back in my disguise, same vest, same boots, same invisible status. But inside, I was vibrating. I had the documents from Dave tucked into the lining of my jacket, wrapped in plastic. Today was the day Craig was going to try to bury the truth under 6 inches of cosmetic concrete. I made my way to the east slab. This was the critical failure point. Yesterday, I had seen the fractures. Today, a crew was already there. They weren't structural repair specialists. They were finishers, guys with trowels and buckets of quick patch, a high-strength epoxy used to hide surface blemishes. You use quick patch to fix a chipped step. You don't use it to glue a crumbling foundation back together. I grabbed a broom and started sweeping nearby, inching closer. Make it look smooth, Craig was barking. He was there early, holding a coffee cup, pacing back and forth. The inspectors are coming for the final walkthrough at 2 p.m. If they see a single hairline crack, we'll fire every one of you. Boss, this crack is deep, one of the finishers said, hesitation in his voice. He stuck a trowel into the fissure. It went in 2 inches. The rebar inside looks rusted like rusted through. Did I ask for a structural analysis? Craig snapped. I asked for a surface finish. Fill it, smooth it, paint it with the gray sealant. By the time it dries, it'll look like virgin concrete. I watched as they poured the epoxy into the wound of the building. It was like putting a Band-Aid on a severed artery. They were literally sealing the evidence of the building's impending failure. A young guy in a white hard hat, a junior engineer, fresh out of college by the looks of him, walked up to Craig. He held a tablet. Craig, the kid said, his voice shaking. I'm looking at the load calculations. If we pour the topping slab today, the added weight on this fractured section. The safety factor drops below 1.0. It could shear. Craig turned on him, his eyes cold and dead. What's your name, kid? Kevin, the kid stammered. Well, Kevin, do you like your job? Do you like paying off those student loans? Craig stepped closer, looming over him. Because in the real world, we don't live in a textbook. We live in deadlines. The safety factor is whatever I say it is. We have a variance from the city. Do you understand? But the variance doesn't change physics, Kevin whispered. Get off my site, Craig said quietly. Go sit in the trailer and process invoices. If I hear another word about physics from you, you'll be blacklisted in this state before lunch. Kevin swallowed hard, looked at the crack being filled with goo, looked at Craig, and then walked away. He chose his paycheck over his integrity. I didn't blame him. He was young. He was scared. But I wasn't young. And I wasn't scared. I waited until Craig moved off to yell at a forklift driver. I pulled out my phone. I needed a picture of the repair while it was still wet. I needed to prove that underneath that smooth gray surface, the concrete was screaming. I moved fast. I dropped the broom, stepped over the caution tape, and knelt by the patch. The epoxy was still tacky. I shoved the end of a zip tie into the goop, gauging the depth. It sank deep, void space. There was a hollow pocket under there. Click, 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 I got the shots. The wet patch, rusted rebar visible through the goo. The time stamp. Hey, you, I froze. It was the finisher. He was staring at me, trowel in hand. What the hell are you doing? He asked, suspicious. I stood up, wiping my hands on my pants. I had to improvise. Craig sent me, said he wanted a progress photo for the daily log, wants to make sure the color match is right. The finisher squinted at me, then shrugged. Whatever. Tell him it's drying fast. I nodded and walked away, heart thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had it. I had the document. I had the photo of the cover-up. I had the witness intimidation, Kevin. I walked to the perimeter fence and slipped out. I stripped off the vest and threw it into the bed of my truck. Goodbye, laborer, I said to myself. I opened the passenger door and pulled out a garment bag. Inside was my official state uniform, navy blue blazer with the seal of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, gray slacks, ID badge on a lanyard, and a hard hat that wasn't scuffed. It was white, pristine, and had the word inspector stenciled across the front in bold black letters. I checked my watch. 10 o'clock a.m. The final walkthrough was at 2 o'clock p.m. Craig was expecting a corrupt city official who would sign the paper and take a bribe. He wasn't expecting me. I drove to a gas station down the road to change. As I looked in the mirror, buttoning the crisp white shirt, I didn't see the tired, middle-aged woman anymore. I saw the grim reaper of bad architecture. I applied a layer of lipstick, red, the color of a stop sign. Okay, Craig, I told my reflection. Let's see how you handle a woman who doesn't clean toilets. At 1:45 p.m., I parked my truck around the block. I didn't want them to see the beat-up Ford. I wanted to arrive on foot, like a sheriff walking into a saloon where everyone is cheating at cards. I walked to the edge of the site, staying out of sight behind a stack of porta-potties. The transformation was nauseatingly impressive. In just 6 hours, they had scrubbed the site clean. The mud was covered with fresh straw. The debris piles were gone. The wet paint signs were up. Flags were snapping in the wind, American flags, state flags, and the Holloway Group flag, which featured a stylized H that looked suspiciously like a dollar sign. A small crowd had gathered near the main entrance. I saw the expensive cars, a black Mercedes, a Lexus, a town car. Councilwoman Hatcher was there, wearing a hard hat that looked like a fashion accessory, laughing with a group of investors in suits. They were drinking sparkling water out of plastic flutes, celebrating a tomb. Craig was in the center of it all, beaming. Had changed his shirt. Now he was wearing a crisp button-down under his vest. He looked like the hero of the story, the man who got it done. He was pointing at the building, making sweeping gestures, probably talking about architectural vision and community impact. He had no idea that 10 miles away, in the State Department of Labor and Industry database, a red flag had just popped up on his file. I had spent the last hour in the gas station parking lot, tethering my laptop to my phone. I uploaded everything: the photos of the cracks, the audio recording of the welder, the email chain Dave gave me, the photo of the patch job. I attached it all to a Category 1 stop work order. In the world of construction, a Category 1 is the nuclear option. It doesn't just pause the work, it revokes the occupancy permit, freezes the bank draws, and mandates a forensic structural audit. It's a career ender. I hit submit at 1:55 p.m. The server refreshed. Status, filed. Authority, T. Miller State Inspector. Now it was real. Now they were technically trespassing on a condemned site. I adjusted my blazer. It felt like armor. I put on my official hard hat. I clipped my badge to my lapel so it caught the light. I watched Craig shake hands with a man I recognized as the city building official, the guy Dave said was blind as a bat. The official was holding a clipboard ready to sign. He didn't even look at the building. He was looking at the catering table. So, Craig, I heard Hatcher say as the wind carried her voice, we are good for the ribbon cutting, no last-minute surprises. Zero surprises, Linda. Craig grinned. This building is solid as a rock. We came in under budget and ahead of schedule. That's the Holloway promise. Solid as a rock, I muttered. More like solid as a lie. I stepped out from behind the portable toilets. The gravel crunched under my clean boots. I didn't walk with the shuffle of a laborer anymore. I walked with the heavy, rhythmic stride of the law. I saw the security guard at the gate start to raise his hand to stop me. He saw the uniform. He saw the badge. He saw the look on my face. His hand dropped. He stepped aside. Afternoon, ma'am, he mumbled. Afternoon, I said, not breaking stride. I walked straight down the center of the access road. The sound of my boots on the gravel seemed to echo. One by one, heads started to turn. First, the investors. They stopped chatting, confused by the appearance of a new figure who clearly wasn't there for the champagne. Then, Councilwoman Hatcher. Her smile faltered. She squinted at me. She recognized the uniform. The state seal is hard to miss. And finally, Craig. He was mid-laugh, clapping the city official on the back. I sensed the silence spreading through the group. He turned around, his eyes locked onto me. At first, there was zero recognition. He just saw a state inspector, annoying but manageable. Then he looked closer. He saw the eyes, the same eyes that had looked at him from the mud yesterday, the same eyes he had told to clean the toilets. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like someone pulled a plug. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Stopped 10 feet away from the group. I didn't yell, I didn't scream. I spoke with the calm, terrifying volume of a woman who holds all the aces. Craig, I said, we need to talk about the East Foundation. The silence that followed my greeting was absolute. Even the distant hum of the highway seemed to vanish. Who is this? Councilwoman Hatcher asked, her voice sharp. She looked from me to Craig, sensing the sudden shift in the atmospheric pressure. Craig, is this one of yours? Craig swallowed hard. He stepped forward, trying to regain his physical dominance, but his posture was brittle. She's nobody. There must be a mistake. Ma'am, you need to leave. This is a private event. I didn't move. I pulled a folded document from my inside pocket, the printed confirmation of the stop work order. I'm not nobody, Craig, I said, my voice cutting through his bluster. I'm Tanya Miller, Senior Structural Inspector for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But you might remember me better as the trash lady you ordered to clean the toilets yesterday. A gasp rippled through the group of investors. Hatcher's eyes went wide. Yesterday? Craig stammered, a bead of sweat tracking through his bronzer. I've never seen you before in my life. Really? I smiled, because I have a distinct memory of you throwing my clipboard into the mud. Right over there. I pointed to the spot. I have a memory of you telling your finishing crew to cover up a structural shear fracture with epoxy and gray paint. Craig's laugh was high-pitched and frantic. This is ridiculous. She's crazy. She's a disgruntled ex-contractor trying to shake us up. Security, get her off the property. 2 security guards started to move toward me. Take one more step, I said, turning my gaze on them, and you will be charged with obstructing a state investigation. That's a felony. You want to go to jail for this guy? The guards froze. They looked at Craig, then at my badge. They backed down. Craig, the city official, the blind one, stepped forward, looking nervous. What is she talking about? I signed off on the foundation myself. You signed a piece of paper, Bob, I said to him. You didn't inspect anything. Did you check the density logs? Did you check the steel stamps? We have a trust-based system, Bob stuttered. Well, trust just expired. I walked past them, straight toward the building. Follow me, all of you, unless you want to buy a condo that's going to collapse before the first mortgage payment clears. I didn't wait to see if they followed. I knew they would. Money is cowardly, but it's also curious. I walked to the east slab. The patch was dry now. It looked perfect. Smooth, gray, solid. A masterpiece of deception. Look at this, Craig shouted, running after me. It's flawless. She's making things up. There's no crack. I stopped at the patch. I turned to the group. Hatcher was there, looking pale. The investors were whispering. Craig says this is solid concrete, I said loudly. He says it's safe for your families, safe for your children. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a heavy steel chipping hammer. It's a tool we use to test concrete hardness. What are you doing? Craig shrieked. That's vandalism. It's quality control, I said. I swung the hammer. Crack. Didn't hit it hard. I didn't have to. The hammer broke through the thin layer of epoxy like it was an eggshell. The gray crust fell away, revealing the dark, gaping void underneath. A chunk of concrete fell into the hole, vanishing into the hollow space below. The crowd gasped. I hooked the hammer into the hole and pulled. A large section of the patch ripped away, exposing the rusted, twisted rebar that I had photographed yesterday. It looked like the jagged teeth of a skull. That, I said, pointing at the rot with my hammer, is a structural failure. It's not a cosmetic blemish. It's a death sentence. I turned to Craig. He was shaking. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing from the collection plate. You filled a load-bearing fracture with glue, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying the weight of the entire state penal code. And you invited the mayor to stand on top of it. Councilwoman Hatcher stepped forward. Her face was a mask of fury. She looked at the hole. She looked at Craig. Craig, she said, her voice trembling, is this true? It's just a minor issue, Craig squeaked. We were going to fix it properly later. After the funding came through, it's standard industry practice. It is not standard practice to commit fraud. I snapped. It is not standard practice to falsify safety records. I reached into my pocket again and pulled out the email chain, the one Dave had given me. Just so we're clear on the intent portion of the lawsuit, I said, handing the paper to Hatcher. Here is the email where Craig admits the foundation is failing and orders the cover-up to hide it from me. Hatcher snatched the paper. She read it. Her hands started to shake. She looked up at Craig with eyes that promised murder. You idiot, she whispered. You absolute idiot. Craig looked around for an ally. The investors were backing away. City official was trying to disappear into the crowd. He was alone. I I can explain, Craig tried. Save it for the deposition, I said. The energy on the site shifted from confusion to panic. The investors were already on their phones, calling their lawyers, desperate to pull their money out before the news broke. The luxury dream was dissolving into a nightmare of litigation. I wasn't done. I turned to the foreman of the crew, a burly guy who had been watching from a distance. Shut it down, I yelled, my voice echoing off the steel skeleton. Kill the power, kill the engines. This site is officially condemned under State Code 409. The foreman looked at Craig. Craig didn't move. He was staring at his boots the same way I had stared at mine yesterday. But I had been acting. He was broken. The foreman looked at me. He nodded. He grabbed his radio. All units, shut it down. We have a code red stop work order. Repeat, shut it down. The effect was immediate. The roar of the generator died. The beep, beep, beep of the backing truck silenced. The grinders stopped screaming. Silence, heavy, thick silence descended on Holloway Ridge. The only sound was the wind whistling through the shoddy steel beams. I walked up to Craig. I still had the sealed envelope in my hand, the official condemnation notice with the bright red sticker. Craig, I said. He looked up. His eyes were red, watery. The arrogance was gone. Look small. Take it, I said, holding out the envelope. Tanya, he whispered, please, if you file this, I'm done, I'll lose my license. I'll lose the company, my dad. Your dad should have taught you better, I said, cold as ice. You ordered a kid to sign off on a death trap. You treated your workers like trash. You treated me like trash. But mostly, you treated the safety of human beings like a line item you could delete. I slapped the envelope against his chest, instinctively grabbed it. You are hereby served, I said. You have 24 hours to vacate the equipment. The state police will be here in an hour to secure the perimeter and seize your records. Police? Craig choked out. Fraud is a crime, Craig, I said, and risking catastrophic collapse, that's reckless endangerment. You better call a lawyer, a good one, not one of your daddy's friends. I turned to Councilwoman Hatcher. She was still holding the email, looking like she wanted to vomit. Councilwoman, I said, I suggest you issue a statement distancing yourself from Holloway Group immediately, unless you want your name on the indictment too. She looked at me, terrified. I didn't know, I swear. Then you should have looked closer, I said. That's your job. I turned my back on them. I walked away from the hole in the foundation. I walked past the stunned investors. I walked past the security guards who wouldn't meet my eye. As I reached the gate, I saw Kevin, the young engineer, standing by the trailer. He looked terrified, but also relieved. He knew he wouldn't have to carry the weight of a collapsed building on his conscience. I stopped for a second. Hey, Kevin, he jumped. Yes, ma'am. Next time, I said, don't let the suit scare you. Physics doesn't care about his deadlines. Physics always wins. Yes, ma'am, he whispered. I walked out the gate. The sun finally broke through the clouds, casting a harsh, feeling light on the half-finished skeleton of the building. It looked like a ruin. Behind me, I heard a car engine roar to life, a siren wail in the distance. The machinery of justice was slow, but once it started, it ground everything to dust. I sat in my truck, parked a mile down the road. I had stripped off the blazer and the tie. I was back in my t-shirt, staring out the windshield at the Pennsylvania hills. My hands were shaking again, adrenaline crash hitting me like a physical blow. I popped the tab on a lukewarm Diet Coke and took a long sip. It tasted like victory. My phone blew up, text from the office. Text from Dave, you did it. Holy SHT, you actually did it. A news alert popped up on my screen, breaking. Holloway development halted amidst safety scandal. State inspector alleges massive fraud. I scrolled through the article. There was a picture of Craig, looking like a deer in headlights, being escorted to his car by police. The article mentioned anonymous tips and heroic oversight. I chuckled. Heroic. There was nothing heroic about it. It was just gravity. I thought about the butt-scrunch leggings joke the HVAC guy would have made. I thought about how Craig looked at me when he thought I was a cleaner. People like Craig think the world is built on handshakes and appearances. They think if you paint over the rot goes away, but I know better. I know that rust never sleeps. I know that a hairline fracture, if ignored, will eventually bring down a tower. I looked at the dashboard of my truck. There was a crack in the plastic, right above the speedometer. It had been there for years. It didn't affect the engine. It didn't affect the brakes. It was just a reminder that things break. But some things you don't let break. I started the engine. The old Ford rumbled to life, sounding healthier than that entire multimillion-dollar construction site. I wasn't going to get a medal. I wasn't going to get a raise. In a week, Hatcher would spin this to make herself look like the victim. Holloway Group would file for bankruptcy and reopen under a new name, probably Summit Heights or Pinnacle Living. The cockroaches always find a new dark corner. But not today, and not that building. That building would be torn down. The steel would be scrapped. The concrete would be crushed, and the ground would be cleared. I put the truck in drive. Solid as a rock, I whispered, mimicking Craig's voice. I turned up the radio. Some classic rock station was playing. I drove away, leaving the dust and the lawyers behind. I had a septic tank inspection in Altoona tomorrow. It would smell terrible. It would be dirty. It would be thankless. But at least it wouldn't be full of SHT like Craig.
Workplaces don't hand out justice memos, but somehow it always finds the right inbox. This story was proof that quiet moves beat loud egos every time. Thanks for listening. See you next time.